Recording in progress. Well, welcome everybody to today's Digital Citizenship lunchtime webinar. I am Christina Mattis with the California Department of Education, and with me today we've got Jeff Below, Angela Ramirez, Elizabeth Wisnia to talk about digital safety and cyber tips and tricks on how we can stay safe in the digital age. What I have become informed on is that somehow in my settings, the video option for our panelists has been disabled, and unfortunately, we cannot see their faces. I will definitely do my best to try to change this setting and this feature. I apologize to our participants that this is some kind of weird setting that I am just not familiar with. And I will try to figure this out. But
it's because we're talking about privacy. So we're being very private today.
We are being very private. That is true. I'm trying to even see in all the options here to allow panelists to, let's see, you can unmute yourself, you can rename yourself, but to show your video, allow panelists to start video. I wonder if that might be.
Try it. Let's see what happens.
Let's see, I did enable that. I wonder if allow panelists to start video. It worked. Look at that.
Technology.
Go team. Make
yeah.
it. Yes. Thank you for your patience. Really appreciate it. And there we've got Angela and Elizabeth and Jeff. Well, welcome. It is wonderful to have everybody here. And in this Brady Bunch square, I have actually Elizabeth right next to me. So can you kick us off with a brief introduction of who you are? And then once you've finished, pick either Angela or Jeff.
Okay, I am Elizabeth Wisnia, and I work in the data management division for CDE, and I do facilitated data privacy training annually for anyone who has access to student data. I also represent the CDE on several multi-state forums, like CEDTA has a cybersecurity and privacy forum that I participate in. There's the U.S. Department of Education's Privacy Technical Assistance Center, and I'm in the Chief Privacy Officers group for them, and other duties as assigned. But that's kind of my main jam. And let's punt it down to my good friend Jeff.
Yeah.
Hey, good afternoon. As of 4 minutes ago. So my name is Jeff. I work here in the InfoSec branch office, supporting whatever things need to be done, including supporting Christina now with Digit Week and all the other things. So here to help and do what needs to be done. And that leaves Angela.
Hi, my name is Angela Ramirez. I am CDE's Information Security and Privacy Officer. Essentially, I champion cybersecurity here and help secure CDE's assets, and also ensure that the organization is in compliance with various privacy laws.
And why don't we kick off with that, learning a bit more about what are some of those security compliance laws that keep us safe and protected?
You want to start, Angela, or you want me to start?
Okay. Please.
Okay, so the main, like the granddaddy of them all is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FERPA. And this is the law that was enacted in, I believe, 1974, somewhere around there. That basically is, no matter where you are in the country, this is the minimum that everybody has to meet in order to protect student records. Some of the highlights of that law include that personally identifiable student information. So it doesn't just mean like direct identifiers like name and things like that, but even indirect identifiers, like if you're, including someone's race or disability information that would allow a reasonable person in the school community to identify a particular student, that cannot be shared under most circumstances. So, we can use that information to make sure that a student is getting the educational services that they're entitled to, but it can't just be shared willy-nilly. There is one of the biggest things under FERPA is every year parents and guardians are supposed to receive a list of what each school and district considers to be directory information. And these are the kinds of things that would be included in the yearbook, like your, who's on what team, who's in what class, that sort of thing. And parents actually have the option to opt out of that information sharing if they don't want their kids' information shared in that way. So that's FERPA. And then on top of that, we have some state laws that have come into play. We have the Student Online Personal Information Protection Act here in California that basically means that companies that knowingly have access to student data are not allowed to use that information to create a profile of a student. They're not allowed to use that information to market to the student or their parents. And that was passed with a companion bill that also has very specific requirements for what needs to be in contracts with like ed tech vendors and others who have access to that information. They have to assert that they don't own the information, that it belongs to the student, the parent, the school district, and it has to be deleted upon request. And they can't use that information to do anything except for what they were hired to do. So if they were hired to do like an English tutorial, they're not allowed to say, hey, you might also like our, English book over here, that our math book over here. You can't do that under this law. And over 25 states have adopted similar laws. So finally, we also had in 2017, the European Union passed something called the General Data Protection Regulation. And in California, we saw what they were doing over there and thought that looked cool. So we went ahead and passed something here called the California Consumer Privacy Act that basically puts a lot of restrictions on businesses for all Californians, not just kids, but basically saying that we have, as Californians, the right to opt out of certain kinds of data collection, to determine how our information can be used in certain circumstances. And if there are companies that are found to be violating the tenets of that law, they can be fined under California law. So I know that was a lot, but if you have questions, you can always email me at privacy@cde.ca.gov. Me and Angela both check that email box. But yeah, there are a lot of laws, starting with FERPA. So PIPA is specific to students, and then the CCPA on top of that.
Angela, I know I've got questions already to follow up on, but Angela, do you have anything to add?
No, I always appreciate when Elizabeth chimes in because she's very knowledgeable. So she pretty much covers everything. So if you have questions, please.
Yes. So what I appreciate hearing here is, right, there are laws and compliance regulations that schools must adhere to. What would happen if, say, there's just out of not knowing that a school doesn't comply with one of these regulations or laws? How can schools become informed?
So there are some great resources, starting with the U.S. Department of Education has studentprivacy.ed.gov, which has a lot of really wonderful, super user-friendly resources, not only on laws, but best practices. And I think that the best approach, especially in an educational setting where we're hoping for folks to learn, right, is that especially if it's a first-time situation, you treat it as a teachable moment. If you see someone sharing information in a way that they shouldn't, especially in education, most people have their heart in the right place. And if you just point out to them, let's not do this, they'll usually go, oh goodness, I didn't think about it, I didn't know. And I think a lot of times people overshare because they think more information is better than less. And so sometimes if you just, give them a call and say, I really want to make sure we're not putting this kid's privacy at risk, so let's just share the minimum amount of information. They're usually very happy to do that. But like I said, there's from studentprivacy.ed.gov, Common Sense Media, lots of great resources available for free to help folks understand not only the laws, but the best practices that can just sort of keep us all safe and, behaving, like I always say in my trainings, just like you would tell kids in the physical world, don't go into dark alleys by yourself, use the buddy system, see something, say something. We just kind of have to take those lessons into the digital space so that, kids are using those same kind of, that same kind of awareness and safety in the digital world.
Yes, yes. And so this question, clarifying question or follow-up, I would say goes to both Angela and Elizabeth. You had mentioned, parents having the ability, the opportunity to opt out of having schools share certain information, say in yearbooks. What can parents do to keep not only their own children safe, but other children safe, right? And I think about, well-intentioned, well-meaning parents who want to share a celebration and they end up posting a picture of not only their child, but everybody else's child without maybe having permission from everybody else's parents, right? What are some of those conversations or activities that parents can become aware of, that we have to be mindful of other people's digital footprint and digital identity?
So I guess I'll start. There are well-intentioned people in this world that want to do the celebration, but on the other side, there are people who do not have the best of intentions that collect information that could be used for phishing attacks, right? So in terms of social media, same thing applies with talking with people and having this conversation. If you're taking pictures, do you mind not including my son or daughter or my child in this? We kind of want to keep our privacy, if that's okay with you. Or if they decide to post, blur out the face. So I know people get excited in the moment. It's just the oversharing happens when we're not thinking clearly, we're too excited and, want to celebrate. But again, it's something that needs to be considered every time. So.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Elizabeth, for putting in our chat the a video on sharenting.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And both, just for all of our viewers, there is a wealth of information that both Elizabeth and Angela have shared over that I will be sharing out once this great webinar is posted on our Digital Citizenship webpage. So stay tuned for that as well. Elizabeth, you had something to follow up with.
I just wanted to add that you also need to be mindful that not everybody's level of sharing is going to be the same as yours. And so as adults, it's on us to sort of model for kids the kind of checking in we need to do before we're posting things in a public space, whether it's on a school website or, a social media post. And so, there are a lot of kids in our school community that, maybe there's super legitimate reasons that we don't want to be sharing that information. Maybe they're under a protective order, or maybe they're just not comfortable. And even in my own household, I mention this to my colleagues and in my trainings and stuff. I've got some very different kids living in my house, and one is very, very introverted and very uncomfortable with sharing. The other one kind of doesn't care. And so I think anytime you're going to be posting anything about anyone, whether it's your kid or otherwise, you need to be checking in and just modeling, this is what we do. We make sure that people are comfortable with the level of stuff that we're sharing before we start creating a digital footprint for them.
Exactly.
That's also a good point, because some people choose to have their social media accounts open and public. Others may not know that they're private. There's no way of telling. So there's that aspect of it as well. So, and I'd like to also mention that once you upload, it's no longer yours. You're uploading to another company and they have their server somewhere. So again, once you post, it's no longer yours. So
yeah, it's almost like you release all of your ownership on that. And you
Essentially,
don't get
yes.
royalties for it. So be mindful of that. A bit of a switching of a gear, but adjacent to all of the safety and the posting. We do know that October is Cybersecurity Month, and it is an opportunity to further highlight, not that we're only cyber safe in October, we should be cyber safe all the time. But what are some of those tips and tricks that we just need to keep at the front of our minds of how we can stay safe?
Sure. So I can certainly take that one. We'll start with the basics. One is passwords. We love strong, lengthy passwords, also complex. So we're talking alphanumeric characters, upper and lower case, special characters, and the longer the better. So most people try to aim for 12 to 16 characters in length, which seems like a lot, but if you use a passphrase, not so hard to remember. If you have a password manager, we encourage people to use that because people tend to use the same password over and over and over. So if there is a breach, attackers typically do something called credential stuffing, which they take your username and password combination and try it against a whole bunch of other different sites, hoping that you're using the same combination and allow them in. So you have that. Also, the use of multi-factor authentication, very important for your special accounts. If banking or any financial or any other personally important accounts have that feature, I always encourage everyone to enable that. So if your username and password is compromised, they would still need that second step, which would contact your phone, and you can either approve or deny. So if you're not immediately at your computer and you get a notification, you can clearly deny it, and lots of headaches saved that way. So if you want to also be mindful of phishing, of course, everyone gets phishing. So they typically use urgent language. They request financial information. Typically, they have attachments that they want you to open that you probably don't expect them. And the other telltale sign is typically generic greetings. Hey, user, or Mr. Mrs., but nothing really specific, which is kind of a dead giveaway. Want to be mindful of that. If you are in a workspace, I would say report it to your local IT staff so they can handle it. But if you're at home, just delete it from your inbox and save yourself some headache. And any other general safety tips, keep your software updated. Same thing with your computer, laptops, and mobile devices, tablets. We're all very connected, but it's essential that you keep that up to date. Anything with antivirus, also make sure it's working and up to date. So again, I think those are the three main things to keep yourself safe. I hope that wasn't too much, but it's a lot. But again, if you continue to do it, it gets easier over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The strong passwords
Very important.
are huge. Yes, super important. And you mentioned a password manager. I'm going to say that's not Post-its or a spreadsheet, right, Angela? That's something else.
That's true. It could be, yes, there are free options, but there are also monthly options with family plans. So all of them are good.
Yeah.
But if for some reason, like my grandparents, they don't always remember their password, but they hardly go anywhere, having their little notepad is okay, as long as they don't share it with anybody, right? But at least they have different passwords for their accounts, which makes me a happy camper. But for most people, I would say lean towards password manager.
Yes, absolutely. Jeff, we haven't heard from, I know you're a big supporter and advocate and champion for all digital citizenship and data privacy. I recall attending many of your sessions along with Elizabeth and going through incident scenarios and communication reports and all of that. What do you have to say on all of this?
Well, I think Elizabeth and Angela have really kind of highlighted the big important things. I think one thing about all of this is it's not if, it's when. And I think that was the thing that we talked about in our drills and things. It's, you will get breached, you will get cloned, you will get whatever. I remember it was a few years ago. I was gone out for Thanksgiving week where I had no connection, and during that time, somebody got a hold of one of my accounts and was sending everybody things saying, "Oh, you're in Tijuana, or you're here, there, you're everywhere." So everybody was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to recapture those accounts, luckily, and they didn't get it. But I remember that, that's not if, it's when. And I think the message with that, and the message that kids hear and kids need to hear, is it's not the end of the world. It's like, okay, you figure out and you recover and you go forward and you keep moving, you be smart about it. And, the sky is not falling, the sky won't fall. I think one of the positive things I've seen with kids, students, is when something does happen, they just flood the airwaves with positive messages, kind of bury out all the negative. And that's one of those things to do, is like, sometimes, I'll have the good outweigh the bad. So, because it's not if, it's when. And just making sure people know that, have the tools and resources to be able to get onto it. And the thing that's interesting with that is, we kind of know what they are. We know how to handle it in education. We're here to help kids. We hear, and so it's like, it's not something new. It's like, how did you help kids before? Well, you called the parents, you worked it out. You called the authorities, you worked it out. You have it. It's like applying all those things we had before. But back in my day, it was, to Elizabeth's point, back in my day, it was a real, yearbook with a real photo of some very goofy people on a math, or in the math club, or whatever. Now it's online. And so, it's like, all those same things apply. So, trying to be the voice of reason, I think, in all this is an important thing for educators to remember. And, having teachers lead to be a part of the conversation, have the students lead, is an important thing.
And that's big. I'm glad you're bringing up the idea of the teacher-student relationship, right? Because there is so much technology in our instruction these days, right? And we hope that technology is integrated with meaning and purpose. It's not just flippantly brought into the classroom. And so, Elizabeth and Angela, when a teacher wants to leverage technology in the classroom, how can the teacher ensure that technology, that platform, that tool is being used safely and in compliance with the students?
Can I take that one first, Angela, or you want me to?
Sure, you can.
Okay.
I'll probably piggyback at some point. So.
Okay, sounds good. So in California, we are lucky to have a lot of great professional organizations that really keep a finger on the pulse of this. And in fact, the California IT educators they have stood up and are maintaining what's called the California Student Privacy Alliance. You can Google it. And in fact, we should probably add that to our resources. But it basically is a database of school districts. It's kind of like, the Costco model for privacy. So like a lot of different school districts throughout the state are a part of this alliance. And if you are part of the alliance, then you agree to make sure that your contracts meet all the, state and federal requirements. And you post also which tools you're using and how you're using them, and the privacy agreement that you're using to use those tools, so that other school districts who are looking at those same tools can see, what everybody's experience is with that. And so it's not just schools and districts that can join, but also vendors. And any vendors that are a part of the Student Privacy Alliance have also agreed to abide by all state and federal laws. And so that's a good place to start, especially for schools and districts that don't have a lot of money. You can go in there and just kind of see what's working in other areas. And I know a lot of districts who are a part of the alliance require their teachers to only use tools that are a part of that alliance.
And I think to piggyback on your points, Elizabeth, for me, my recommendation is always for teachers to check with their IT staff. So the IT staff can certainly look at the functionality of it, the system, or the software that they're looking at. Also read over the terms and conditions, and most importantly, the privacy policy. If there is one, what kind of data do they collect? How long do they keep it for? Also, if there is a option for encryption, so we keep that data protected.
And Angela, that's a really good point that you mentioned about data encryption. And so we know that when setting up a safe and secure tech environment, say for schools or organizations such as ours, it takes this camaraderie, the synergy of your back end technical setup, and then how the users are supported and educated on how to be safe and secure. So thinking about data encryption, how might that be? What suggestions, recommendations do you have when setting up the back end technical piece of a school or an organization?
So I'm not sure if there's technical people on this call, but I would say if we pivot a little bit away from encryption, which can get very deep, because there's various standards to meet with, depending on the hardening you're looking for, but also the best practices of limiting permissions. So allowing certain roles to be defined. So administrators should have that extra permissions to do what they need to do and set up secure communications, right? But then for standard users, they might not need that level of the system, right, to do what they need to do. So the least privilege model is something that's very important. That definitely helps. So if something does happen for a standard user, the impact's not so great. As far as the administrators, they definitely need to disable ports and protocols that are not needed, and then read the manual. There's usually a security setup best practices either on the internet or it should be just on the internet as a PDF, and best practices should be followed in that regard. So for data that is not sensitive and public, those restrictions can be relaxed. But if you're dealing with student data, sensitive data, financial data, that does and should be encrypted. Should be an option for that.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. We have just about a minute or so left in our time together. This was so fast, but so informative.
It was a lot, I'm sure.
It's a lot of information to definitely either learn about or be reminded of. What would be your one message, if you could give one message out to our listeners and viewers, what would that be?
My message would be, don't be the weakest gazelle. So, when you're watching the nature documentaries and there's the lion prowling at the back of the pack, they always look for the one that's limping, right? So you don't have to be the fastest one or the one at the front of the pack, but just do a couple of these things that Angela talked about, make long, complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, just make it a little harder to catch you and you're much less likely to be a victim.
Okay, don't be the weakest gazelle, the slowest gazelle. Got it. Angela, what about you?
I would say just in general, if it doesn't feel right, maybe stop and ask. And that applies to a lot of things, but also with technology, direct messaging, sharing that data, just take a minute, pause and ask yourself, does this feel right? Or do I have more questions? Never rush.
Yeah, go to your intuition for sure. Thank you. Jeff, round us out here.
I was going to say, if it sounds like it's too good to be true, it probably is. So just keep that in mind also. But Elizabeth and Angela really already said it. So what else do I have to say?
No, that's great. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either Elizabeth or Angela. They've shared their contacts throughout our time together. I will also be providing their list of resources once this video gets posted as well. Thank you, Elizabeth. privacy@cde.ca.gov. Please feel free to email that address with any questions or comments. It's super helpful. Thank you again for Elizabeth and Angela taking time out of their day to help teach us to stay safe and secure. Jeff, it's always a pleasure when you can join on and continue supporting these great efforts as well. Thank you all and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank
See
you.
you later. Thank you.